Welcome, friends,
to the How-To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
And I'm Uncle Dan.
and I'm Uncle Doug.
And this is your user's guide to life on the outside.
Yeehaw! That's right. Leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
But it can also be a scary world. Things work differently now.
Never fear. That's why we are here.
Oh, we are your audio uncles. And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields.
We're going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get one that we know of, so you better make the most of it.
Well, gents,
Hi.
Hello.
here we are. What a week, I guess. What a week. What a show.
It was the Christmas time.
Yes.
It's the most Christmas time
Nope.
of the year.
That's
we,
over.
we had of course, the Christmas morning tradition of a car bomb,
right?
in downtown Nashville. So that's nice.
Yeah.
Glad everybody's okay. Our Nashville people out there.
I mean,
Yeah.
the bomber's kind of fucked up, but everybody else.
Well,
is
I
doing
think
all
the
right.
press is not identifying him as a bomber. They're saying he was disaffected and lonesome.
Oh, right.
Equals
No, he's white. White folks can be bombers. They just can't
which
be
equals
terrorists.
white. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we should have been reaching out to him some more, I suppose. So.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, we got a fun show. It's number 171, which is a 7 with a 1 on each side of it, which is kind of nice. I think there's
Wow, look at you go.
a certain
Wow.
symmetry to the asymmetry there that I appreciate. And I'm going to be talking about visitors.
You almost forgot your own segment. I'm pretty sure that's what just happened.
No, my brain just kind of is not entirely online right now, so I'll get there.
And I am going to try and recruit you guys.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring it all home with the first half of the blood-soaked book of Joshua.
Yeah,
Woohoo!
it's not triggery or anything, I don't think, but it's definitely probably the highest body count conversation we've had.
Yeah.
It's rough. Also, how many times have you been circumcised? We'll get to it.
Not
We'll
enough.
figure it out.
Too many times.
Either too many times or just right.
That's
or not
right.
enough.
It's the doctor's fault, not mine.
And then, Dan, we're going to be joining you for something this week.
Yeah, that's right. This announcement will come just in time for some of you, maybe too late for others. But we're going to be doing the TGIA New Year's Eve extravaganza, live streaming for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Frank and I are. You guys won't have to. We'll mercifully only have to be there for 2.5 hours of that.
Oh,
And
I'm finding that out with you, good listeners.
no. Well, but yeah, lots of fun guests, including you guys, and you know some of the Piat friends, the guys from Puzzle in a Thunderstorm, and you know various and sundry others. It's just gonna don't go to a party. Obviously, it's because it's COVID, and unless you're in New Zealand. You can't go to a party, so please don't.
Yeah, this
Just
is the
join
first.
us.
This is the first New Year's where you're lame if you go out. So
That's right.
Stay home.
That's right. So stay home, kiss your damn self, and crack a bottle of bubbly. We're all gonna have a blast of a time.
We'll drink alone together.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
go to the
Together alone.
Thank God I'm Atheist page, thankgodimatheist.com for that, and you can sign up, and we'll send you emails about when and where and what to do. And that's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. Well, we look forward to it, and let's do a show.
Let's do it. Uncle Dan.
Hello.
Is that the Queen? Hello.
Thank you.
As
That's
we'll
my impression of
see
the Queen.
in the fullness of this episode, not everything that Israel tells you should be taken with a full, or with less than a grain of salt. As we discussed recently in an episode, the Israeli, what was his position?
The Israeli space program.
The Israeli space program, which is
A thing, I guess.
I guess.
Yeah. Good for them.
Said he was in communication or had been in communication with a alien civilization.
It's nice for them to have a program where they're not shooting rockets at their direct neighbors.
I was about to
Destroy.
say, like, does a a rocket have to go into orbit to land 15 miles away? But
Yeah.
ooh, but yeah. So
So, Uncle Mark, what do you have to say about that?
Wow, that just petered right out. I got lost transmission on you there, Doug. So
I'm sorry.
I have this really strange memory that has haunted me for decades, and I don't know if maybe I've told you this, Doug, but I don't know if I've told you, Dan. In like 1994 or 5, I was working on a movie in southern Utah.
You have told me that. You have told me this.
Okay, so I needed some random thing. So I called around and I found some guy out by Colorado City that had it, right? And so I drove, it was phone book days, so I drove that lonely road from Fredonia, Arizona to the Pipe Springs area, if you've ever been out there, down by Colorado City, just north of the Grand Canyon. It is a pretty lonely spot. Have you guys been there?
Oh, I've been there many times. It's very lonely.
I haven't been there, but I want to now. You're really selling it.
It's beautiful, but it is rugged. So it's just a bunch of weird little clusters of houses and trailers here and there in the blazing heat of the Red Rock Desert. And I couldn't find the place that I was trying to get to. The addresses don't make sense, and half the roads don't have signs, and half the houses don't have numbers because they've either fallen off or evaporated in the sun.
Or the road signs are just riddled with bullet holes.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I decided to pull over at the least The Hills Have Eyes sort of trailer, which was still very The Hills Have Eyes. And it was kind of a wreck from the 50s or 60s, and a classic old trailer, and the porch was super creaky. So I go up and I knocked on the door, and a man I did not expect answered it. Now, I'm not trying to be ableist here, but the oddness of what happened next will lend to the whole shebang here in a sec. When the door opened, a small, roundish man answered, probably in his mid-60s. He was very bald, except for one tuft of totally white hair on top of his head like Bert. And he was so beyond pale. His skin was seriously on the verge of being transparent. It wasn't like albinism, right? His condition was like nothing I'd ever seen before or since. And he had the biggest eyes I've ever seen, for real. I'm not making any of this up. He had these huge blue eyes, but they were super bloodshot and impossibly watery. I don't remember him blinking. And he was doing that thing with his hands that cartoonists use to convey extreme nervousness, where you kind of like have your hands in a praying position, but you're bouncing them back and forth off each other quickly, like, And so I asked if he knew where the address I needed was, and in a very heavy accent, he said he did not, because he had just moved there from Germany yesterday. Now, this area is all rednecks and polygamists, like Clive and Bundy types.
Right.
So to see this very soft, very fragile, very foreign man appear before me was a bit of a shock. So this is before we had cell phones, so I asked if I could use his phone to call the place. And when he withdrew into the darkness, he kind of gestured towards the little kitchen where the phone was. So I go inside, and as my eyes adjust, it's really dark. I see he has one kind of like dining chair and one side table. That was all the furniture in this place.
Oh, sure. That's all you need.
That's all you need. He had what he needed. Well, he just came from Germany, pre-packed light. And on the side table was this big old radio playing some really staticky AM talk radio station. I couldn't make out what it was saying. As I reached for the phone on the counter, I noticed there were 10 or 12 frame pictures on the wall, all the same size. They all looked like they were by the same artist. And they each featured a flying saucer accompanied by a celestial being of some kind, like an angel, or just straight up Jesus. So, you know those moments in your life when you consciously take a mental picture? This was definitely one of those moments. So I made my call and I figured out where to go. The whole time he stood behind his chair at the far end of the room, nervously tapping his fingers together. And I to be polite, I made apologies for bothering him and thanked him in German and got out. He said nothing the rest of the time, just watched me with his wide eyes from a safe distance. So why?
Because you were obviously from the federal government trying to trick him.
Yeah, with my amazing ponytail and my goatee. So,
Or you failed to notice the sign on the porch that said Himmler residence.
So why did I bring up my having wandered into an episode of The X-Files just now? It's partly because my husband and I are currently watching the Heaven's Gate documentary series on HBO Max. Have you guys seen any of those?
No, I did not know that existed.
Yep, it's a thing. So
What's it called?
it's called Heaven's Gate.
Okay.
Now, if
They were very clever with the titling.
super clever. Now, if you need a refresher on this tragic story, Doug covered it in episode 61, but in short, it was a very bizarre suicide cult that was certain a flying saucer was going to whisk them away to their glory in the 90s. About the same time, I was standing in the living room of either a contactee or a not very well disguised visitor to Earth via Germany just the day before. And like our careful examination of the world of cryptozoology in episode 108, I thought we could have some fun with the wild and woolly, out of this world of UFOs and their place in the religious pantheon. So here goes. The internet claims the first real UFO group or cult in the U.S. was something that became known as the Ashtar Galactic Command, and later the Ministry of Universal Wisdom, first imagined by UFO contactee George Van Tassel around 1953. Though there is a case to be made for Saint Germain and the Church Universal and Triumphant, but let's not start a whole fucking thing between them here. So Van Tassel found himself in possession of a dusty patch of desert at Giant Rock in California. This is going to sound familiar, Dan.
Yeah.
How did he get this land? Well, a weird German man, detect a theme yet, that he met while pumping gas in the desert told him about it, and later blew himself up with dynamite as the police closed in on him in 1942 because he was suspected of being a Nazi spy.
Yep.
Getting land the usual way. Anywho, George set himself up out there and started hosting some kind of meditation retreats. Things were going swimmingly until one night, Ashtar, a guy from Venus, invited him, which I thought women were from Venus, but apparently Ashtar is too, invited him on his ship and kindly showed him how to rejuvenate the human body, which is super cool. Van Tassel soon built a kind of round building called the Integratron, which Dan covered in episode 88. George Van Tassel...
Worst transformer ever.
He has such integrity that he won't transform.
Although I do like the idea of like you go into the Integratron, which just makes sounds at you, and the sounds that it makes are...
No, it's the worst because when it shows up as a transformer of James Comey and you transform it into a transformer of Elliot Ness.
Anyhow, George Van Tassel shuffled off this mortal warp coil in 1978, but you can still go to Giant Rock and get your vibrations on with some singing bowls in the Integratron.
Yes.
But I think the internet might be wrong about the Ashtar Galactic Command, that it maybe isn't the first American interplanetary-based church, is it, guys?
Absolutely not.
Who do we think that honor should go to? Yes, the religion of the square planet or state of our birth, the Mormons.
That's
Hello.
right.
Hey guys, we've discussed Mormons and what lies beyond the wild blue yonder a few times on the show, most notably with Doug's bit about Kolob in episode 18 and my visit to the Moon and Sun Quakers in episode 132. But Mormonism actually believes in a multiverse where there are uncountable planets inhabited by our spirit cousins, overseen by gods who were once men like us. Well, like you guys, not like me, because no unrepentant gay is getting their own planet, no matter how fabulous it would obviously be. Moving on.
Correct.
The Brotherhood...
Well, I think you hit on why.
Yeah.
You just make all of our planets look bad.
Yeah,
And
your planets will all look like Orem. and mine would be, Fire Island. So... The Brotherhood of the Seven Rays, also known as the Seekers, was founded in 1953 in Michigan. Not unlike the poor dummies of Heaven's Gate, they believed a flying saucer was going to come and collect them on December 21st, 1954. When it did not, they quickly adjusted to Christmas Eve, and when that didn't happen, it all just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
We talked about these guys very briefly when I did the multiple failed Ends of the World prophecies a few weeks ago.
Right.
Most interestingly... The group was being studied by Leon Festinger, a social psychologist that had infiltrated the group to study how they would cope when, as he correctly surmised, their ride didn't show up. So he wrote a book about it called When Prophecy Fails, and from that later developed the model of cognitive dissonance to explain the cultists' reaction to the disappointment. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That being kind of the origin of that. There are, of course, the good people of the Aetherius Society, a seemingly benevolent group of saucer people whose founder and prophet, George King, claimed that one night in 1954, a voice told him, "Prepare yourself. You are to become the voice of interplanetary parliament."
Does that mean he passed the audition?
And here,
what that is?
Here I thought that was Jar Jar Binks.
Oh, God damn it. I was about to make a sequel joke. Fuck.
And then a famous but also unnamed earthly guru walked through the wall of his locked apartment in London and taught him mastery of all forms of yoga and meditation, which, because A follows B, meant he was then able to get telepathic messages from Aetherius, a guy on Venus again. His group still exists and claims their prayers have diverted many earthly disasters.
Oh, thank you.
Obviously aided in their spiritual stewardship by an invisible orbiting flying saucer called Satellite Number 3 and the help of something called the Great White Brotherhood, which is a very problematic thing out of Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy movement, which has led to a real thing called esoteric Hitlerism, which we really need to discuss sometime, but I really fucking don't want to.
Do we ever get to know what happened to Satellite 1 and Satellite 2?
That's none of your satellite business, bub.
Shut your
Those
fucking
were
mouth.
the Dave Matthews Band's less popular releases.
They were the instrumentals. So then naturally we all know about Edward Albert Myers. Sorry, everybody. Freie Intergemeinschaft für Grenz- und Geisteswissenschaft und Ufologiestudien. I'm so sorry for murdering that, Annika Brockschmidt. She is or was a big fan of the show. In a language I do speak, that means the free community of interest for the border and spiritual sciences and ufological studies, or FICIBS. This innocuous
I'm sorry,
sounding...
was Mineshaft not part of the translation?
Oh, no, Mineshaft is like the Gemeinschaft is like a group of people you work with.
Oh.
So take that.
All right.
This innocuous-sounding group was founded in the 1970s by humble Swissman Edward Albert Meyer, known to his flock simply as Billy. Being just
Why does it tickle me so much? A German speaker named Billy.
Billy is a flying saucer man. Come to Switzerland and see him. Being just such a humble Swissman, Billy claims to be the reincarnation of such historic nobodies as the biblical Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Jesus, and naturally Muhammad.
Wait, he's all of those people?
He's a reincarnation of all of them. So
I love how nobody's a reincarnation of a French peasant. You know what I mean? Like everyone's always
nobody worked in a toll booth in a past life.
Exactly.
Right. So, having joined the French Foreign Legion in the 1960s, the sum of all profits then lost his arm in a bus accident in Turkey before choosing UFO profit as a vacation. I think it's the little details about these people that really color it in, don't you think?
Yeah, it's what makes it nice.
He claims as a child he met Svath, an aging but kindly extraterrestrial of the Plagiaran race. Through Svath, he also met Space Lady Asket, Svath's granddaughter Sam Jace, and of course Plagiarian officer Ptah. What Billy is perhaps most famous for are his remarkable photographs of the exterior and interior of Plagiaran saucers, or as they call them, beam ships, with permission, of course. In his photos, classic 1950s sci-fi saucers that haunt the placid skies over beautiful pastoral Swiss landscapes. Staggering evidence of visitors indeed, until you consider that his ex-wife said he made them out of the garbage can lids and pie tins they very much appear to be, and that his photographs of the sexy space ladies Asket and Nira were actually doctored images of members of the girl band The Gold Diggers from an appearance on the Dean Martin Show. So either Billy is a fraud and a joke, or he's proven that the comedy variety Dean Martin Show, canceled in 1974, remains the secret portal for alien infiltration of our blue dot even today. We report, you decide.
I've seen the Dean Martin Show, and I believe that there might be something to it.
We're living through the age of QAnon. That sounds utterly plausible to me.
If what the aliens were bringing to Earth was booze, then yes, that's probably what was going on in the Dean Martin Show. By now, everyone knows that Scientology, also codified in 1953 as a cult that very much believes, like the Mormons, that life on Earth is of intergalactic origins. We, the residents of the galactic backwater Tigiak, are descended from the souls of frozen, hydrogen-bombed, and volcanoed, which is the first time that's ever been used as a verb, people dumped here by galactic horrible boss Xenu like 50 billion trillion years ago, or something like that. Doug and I have both taken a crack at Xenu in episodes 70 and 143. They're both hilarious. But basically, Scientology is fucking evil, and no, Tom Cruise is not a good person because of his staged and leaked rant about COVID precautions, so stop that. And of course,
come on.
he's a bad person. And of course, Uncle Dan covered the weirdly cool and very sex-positive followers of strange French person Claude Verlon, better known as Rail, way back in episode number 2.
Whoa.
That's right.
Shout out to episode 2. Raelians believe humanity was created by a highly advanced spacefaring race called the Elohim, and that all the prophets of the olden times were human Elohim hybrids. It's all silly and absurd, but really they just want to fuck and wear silver space outfits like Bootsy Collins cosplayers. I declare them mostly harmless. Now, not many people...
We'll revisit that in my segment. We'll see if we're still on that page.
Oh, okay. You got something coming up from them.
Yeah.
Not many people know that the Nation of Islam, now headed by the cartoonishly awful Louis Farrakhan, has a touch of the flying saucer in it as well.
What?
Yeah.
I love it.
Elijah Muhammad became the second leader of the group after its founder, W.D. Fard Muhammad, vanished without a trace, which is true. But Elijah Muhammad said that the Earth is 76 trillion years old, and that black Americans are descended from the black Asian tribe of Shabazz, who came to Earth from where he does not explain, just in time for it to explode 66 trillion years ago, forming two separate bodies, the Earth and the Moon, and something about God being our leading scientist at the time, but yet failing to get all the new Earth people to speak the same language. This is not, I must confess, the craziest idea in the Nation of Islam, which we need to do a whole segment on soon.
Mark, I'm sorry. I have to take my medicine. I don't know what the fuck happened in the last 2 minutes, but I'm fucking completely lost.
You're completely lost.
What the fuck is happening?
I'll get you caught up. And then this will definitely catch you up. And then there is this little gem that started as the Chinese Soul Light Research Association, then became God's Salvation Church when it moved to Bill and Ted's hometown of San Dimas, California, which I refuse to believe is a coincidence. But by the time they moved to Garland, Texas in 1997, because the founder thought it sounded like Godland, they were known as Chen Tao, or just the True Way Cult.
Okay.
A sloppy mix of Taoism, Buddhism, Christianity, and several 1950s B sci-fi movies. It was founded by Hong Ming Chen, who believed that 5 different times since the dinosaurs, God saved humankind in a flying saucer, and that we get 3 souls each, which is cool, and that the solar system is 4.5 trillion years old. What is it with fucking UFO guys and their insane timelines?
Right.
And that the solar system was created in a nuclear war between someone. Mind your own damn saucer business over there, mister. So in 1997, after Chen and his small band of followers bought upscale houses in a neighborhood in Garland, Texas, that they would drive to and from dressed in all white, complete with white cowboy hats in luxury cars, he had a prophecy. He declared that on March 31st of 1998, God would appear on a single TV channel to everyone in North America, regardless of their cable access, and that he would then materialize in the living room of Mr. Chen's house for a meet and greet and light refreshments.
Nice.
If you had the misfortune of watching Wonder Woman 1984, this TV thing was obviously stolen by the producers of that film. Have you guys seen it yet?
Yeah, I watched it
not
last
yet.
night.
Whew. Anyway.
I'm too busy having a stroke that I think started about 9 minutes ago.
Stroke of genius. Anyway, with the Memory of Heaven's Gates suicides and the other recent suicides of the Order of the Solar Temple cult, which we discussed in episode 90, fresh in public memory, this got the local authorities worried. So they started closely monitoring the cult in hopes of preventing a big Flavor Aid incident. Well, having failed... That's a good laugh. Oh, fun. Having failed in an earlier prediction that he would find a Jesus of the West that he said would look exactly like Abraham Lincoln, you won't be surprised to learn that the prophesied TV broadcast did not interrupt anyone's regular programming on March 31st, 1998. But the Milwaukee Brewers did lose their first National League game to the Atlanta Braves 2-1 on that day. So
something.
Yeah.
That's not nothing.
I looked up that day, like what happened on this day, and that was literally it. the fucking baseball game. So Chen's followers were devastated, but luckily not so much that they went full Jonestown. Humiliated, Chen offered to be stoned to death or crucified for his failure, but cooler heads prevailed. The group just kind of fell apart, and as of this recording, Chen's whereabouts are unknown.
Wow, that is not an American cultist, because that if it were an American, we know exactly what would have happened. He would have blamed everybody else and said that, the numbers were just off, and it'll still happen, and he'd come up with a totally other alternate date and just claim he was still right.
And or murder-suicide.
I just like to hear that somebody actually took responsibility for getting one wrong.
I am so utterly confused right now that the only thing that makes me think that I have sanity is the fact that I can taste copper. I don't even know what's happening anymore.
Let me bring it home for you.
Okay.
There are quite a few more UFO cults and bizarre beliefs around them, a whole weird industry of sorts.
Oh my God!
Including an online course in ufology from something called the Center for Excellence that costs a very precisely priced $157.92.
I'm super sorry. I don't mean to interrupt the flow, but ufology.
That's a real study. Ufology, and then it takes 150 hours to complete. And you get a downloadable certificate at the end. Don't think I wasn't tempted. But here's the thing. Did you guys ever watch Carl Sagan's groundbreaking TV series Cosmos, the original?
I never did. I wish that I had.
I believe that I have, but I don't no longer.
You were pretty
understand
young,
what reality is. So I did watch it.
Doug is standing in a trailer in northern Arizona, nervously tapping his fingers together.
That's right.
It's so good. In episode 12, Sagan very clearly laid out some estimates for the possibility of other intelligent life in our galaxy using something called the Drake equation. I could explain it all here, but it's actually fairly simple in its complexity, but it's far more informative just to watch the video of it, which I'll include in the show notes. He's just a bit better at explaining sciences and the maths than I am. So.
Does it involve a 3 a.m. call?
Does it involve what?
That's never mind. It's a joke about Drake the rapper that
you're having a hard time, Doug.
You guys are too old to understand.
Yeah, that's true.
You're having a hard time. So, adding up all the variables, he makes a pretty fucking compelling case that we are far from alone, potentially millions of technologically advanced civilizations in our galaxy.
Right.
That's a fucking lot. But the more obvious problem for ufologists and UFO cultists is the distances these other beings would need to cover to get to us, right? Most of the cults and loonies like David Icke have carve-outs for some kind of interdimensional travel and vibrating across dimensions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But as Sagan intimates in his episode, maybe their evolution didn't include several epochal misdirects on the way to creating their big brains like ours did, right? Potentially giving them a multi-million year head start on us, making it somewhat within the realm of possibility they've been flying around for thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of years already.
Totally.
While Sagan was
Or trillions. What about trillions of years?
It could have been zillions of trillions. Maybe they have super duper missiles. While Sagan was quite the optimist about their existence and our happy commingling with them, another gigantic brain on all things cosmic, Stephen Hawking, was very much not. He concluded that a very likely motivating factor for alien beings going to the great trouble and expense of interstellar travel might be resource exhaustion and environmental collapse at home, so they could be nomads looking to take our shit, like pretty much every science fiction movie ever, especially directed by Roland Emmerich. On July 24th of this year, the Washington Post published an article that might give Hawking a little heartburn were he alive today. I don't know if you guys have seen this one. It seems the fabled old secret government UFO project Blue Book of the 50s and 60s didn't really go away. The program called, that still exists kind of, it's called the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, or UAPFT, or UAPFT
NAMBLA
for short. NAMBLA released some videos that are pretty startling, showing foreshore weird objects moving at pretty fucking staggering speeds and behaving in odd ways. Louis Elizondo, the former director of UAP, and Eric W. Davis, an astrophysicist who worked with UAP, both claim they have fragments of metal and, quote, off-world vehicles that they, quote, we could not have made ourselves. But don't worry, this is all overseen by the steady hand and thirsty brain of Florida's online Bible bot and chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Marco Rubio.
Oh, good. Good. We're in good hands.
Please, people of Georgia, elect Warnock and Ossoff in a couple weeks, please.
Right.
You know, the Rubio, it definitely seems like an alien with the lips and everything.
And the thirst, the dehydration problems.
Thirst.
He's got the thirst. So, while the UFO cultists are weird and ridiculous, based on Carl Sagan and the Drake equation, and if the very fine people at the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, or UAP, are to be believed, there is a lot more probability and proof of alien life, and maybe even the potential for alien familiarity with our fair planet, than any other religious claim I can think of. So, maybe the UF people are crazy. Crazy like a fox.
That's right.
Fox
An
Mulder,
alien
that is.
Fox from
Got a little pop culture in at the end for you. So that's UFOs and UFO religion and cults, guys.
Venus. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, let's...
Well, I definitely
away.
feel like the tinfoil hat over my head is like the tinfoil cover over a popcorn. Microwave popcorn. Because I am...
why don't you adjust the tightness on that, and we'll move on
Let's
to our
move
next
on.
thing.
Bye. Uncle Doug, you seem nice.
Do I?
Yeah, you seem really nice. I feel like you're somebody I could be friends with.
Are you coming on to me?
Well, kind of, but in a better way. Hey, Uncle Dan,
Hey,
you seem nice too.
I think we should bring Mark back to the clubhouse, don't you?
I'm
bring
tapping,
Doug.
I'm
That's-
tapping out at this point, guys.
All right, look.
Doug's struggling tonight.
Yeah, we're I think we're all struggling.
Yeah.
This is COVID times.
If
None of
only-
us are doing okay.
If only there was somebody that could just kind of come along and make us feel like it was all going to be okay, Dan.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? It's how we dream for it. Listen, we talk a lot about those wacky little groups that pop up all over the world with their charismatic leaders and their bizarre practices and beliefs. Oh, sure, it's easy to make fun when you're looking in from the outside, but for those involved, it's all too easy to be ensnared and lose years of their lives to their fanatical devotion. Of course, I'm talking about fantasy sports leagues. No, I mean
I can't
cults.
tell you how much those have cost me time-wise in my
Right?
life.
Over the years.
I would
yeah.
say exactly nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
So far.
No, in this case, I am not talking about fantasy sports leagues yet. Maybe that's the next cult we'll talk about on the show. But no, I mean various cults. In our discussion of cults, we usually focus on the parts of those cults that are most alarming or crazy. And we're right to do that because it's those alarming, destructive practices that we as a society have an obligation to expose and hopefully rid ourselves of.
Yeah, and they have their own PR departments. They don't need us to do that.
Yeah,
for them.
exactly. It's not our job to make them look good.
Yeah.
But there's a downside to that focus, which is that it can make it seem like you'd have to be utterly bonkers to join one of these groups. By looking at all the crazy associated with the cults, we make it seem like there's no way a person in their right mind could possibly be tricked into joining. Well, we know that's not the case. Anyone who's seen the documentaries about NXIVM or the Rajneeshis can easily see that many of the people who joined are eminently sane, well-meaning people who, for some reason or another, found themselves neck-deep in looniness.
Even intelligent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, believing strange things that go against any reasonable view of the observable universe. And that's not by accident. As much as we like to think of cults as sort of chock full of Looney Tunes, unstable people are actually terrible for a cult. The leader might be off his or her nut, but cults want stable, good little worker bees for their membership. They need people who can bring in money and keep the membership growing. Having unbalanced people in the mix makes the whole endeavor far more volatile. So, how does this happen? How can smart, kind, intelligent people end up in one of the wacky cults we talk about week after week on this show? Well, I'm not a mental health professional, so I can't speak too much to the quirks of human psychology that can be manipulated to draw us in. There are some big things that experts point to, of course. Things like, cults seek out people in their most vulnerable states. Now, Doug, you were a missionary. Weren't you explicitly told to look for vulnerable people?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it was like they were quite open about that with you guys, weren't they?
100%. Yep.
Find people, yeah. So people who are mourning, they've lost a loved one, or they're under a great deal of stress and strain, or if they're lonely or poverty-stricken. These are all sort of the vulnerable types that you really want to get to if you're recruiting for your cult.
100% right.
Then
I'm so ashamed.
Yeah, if you guys want to hear a longer discussion about this, you have to become a patron and listen to this week's patron only.
Yeah, that's true.
We do a long talk about this.
Yeah, it's true. Then, after they've found you, they buddy up. The Moonies coined the term love bomb, as we heard. Or did you say that, Mark?
Yeah, we just talked about love bomb.
Yeah. The cults all offer sort of kindness, community, and more. They often focus on making new people feel very welcome and loved long before they hit somebody with the intense dogmas and lifestyle controls. Once a person has given themselves over to this new family, they try to isolate them. They pressure them to move away from family and friends who don't want to join with them. Frequently, they have them move into an area or a living situation that they can control completely. Come to the compound. You'll be safe here. Look, the world is full of evil, but here you'll be surrounded with love. But what I really wanted to get into was some of the different tactics that cults have used for recruiting. There are lots of similarities in the manipulations that they use to keep you on the hook. But some cults have gotten very clever or downright wacky about how they get that hook into you initially. So, let's talk cult recruitment tactics.
Yes.
First, since we already brought it up.
This is a kind of how to start your own cult. So you're going to want to take notes.
This might not be that. We'll make that call by the end of the thing. First, since we talk a lot about Mormons, I want to briefly cover them. Now, Doug, you were part of the biggest recruitment tactic that the Mormons have, which is their missionary program.
Yep.
Clean-cut, smiling young doofuses are sent 2 by 2 around the world to do a little door-to-door salesmanship. Listeners who have heard us on any of a few episodes of God Awful Movies knows that most missionaries strike out about 99.9% of the time, which is terrible and demoralizing. Now, not all, and we'll get to that.
Do you think the Mormon program is the largest, for lack of a better word, professional proselytization program in the world?
I think it must be.
Hey, it's got to be up there.
Because there are much larger religions.
Yeah.
But they just don't actively recruit.
Like there's Catholic missionaries, but they tend to kind of be more, I think, a little more service-oriented. And then if somebody wants to join up, great.
Right.
Well, now.
Yeah. Yeah, they used to have a pretty strong recruitment program. But
since you took our thumb screws away, now it's like, we got to
fucking
serve punch and cookies.
Yeah. So anyway, the Mormon missionaries strike out a lot. But it's kind of obvious why they do that when you consider that the Mormons you consider what the Mormons want people to buy into. Come join our group. We have a nonsense theology, an intense and pleasure-deprived lifestyle, and require insane amounts of work and engagement from you. But on the plus side, we have a book for you to read, and you get to be with your family for eternity. Yay.
Would you like to throw an extra gold coin into Scrooge McDuck's pool?
Right.
Come join us.
Exactly. Work your whole life and make us a tiny bit richer.
And you can clean the ward bathrooms for free.
Yeah, exactly. But if the pitch is bad, that's fine because this is a numbers game. If a missionary knocks on 10 doors a day, 5 days a week for 2 years, which, I don't know, is that a low or a high estimate, Doug? How many doors would you knock at? What do you think an average missionary
That seems
would
pretty
knock?
average. Like that's yeah.
How many a day?
10 a day for 5 days a week, that's 5,200 doors.
Yeah.
If they only hit 0.1% of the time, that's still 5 doors that opened. If a couple of those are families of 4, that's 11 new members that teenager has brought into the fold.
Yeah, I remember your pod. Doug got a lot of baptisms in Honduras, but
Yes.
I remember your other pod partner Frank saying in Rome he got cero.
That's right. The big goose egg. And I've heard that from other friends of the show who also were in Rome. You don't want to. That's like the worst possible mission.
What the fuck are you thinking?
Oh,
Hi,
no,
everybody.
no.
I know that this is the global center for Catholicism, but would you like to try a goofy American cult?
I'm sorry, Dan. I guest hosted your other podcast with Frank.
Yeah.
One time, and we talked about our missions. Where I was in Honduras and I got malaria and dengue fever and dysentery and baptized over 100 people.
Yeah.
And Frank baptized none, but spent his days touring, the sights of Rome,
Right.
Enjoying Rome.
and eating pasta.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I feel like you did get the raw end of that deal for sure.
Maybe you weren't valiant in the war in heaven. You know?
Right? Exactly.
And Frank was fucking Wolverine.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let me get through these numbers real quick.
Okay.
So if that kid got 11 new members, considering the fact that these kids don't get paid for their labor, that's a perfectly reasonable success rate to the church, especially when you consider that there are something like 67,000 missionaries out in the world at any given time.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
That's 175,000 new members a year, even under the most dismal circumstances. And if a missionary is willing to bend his ethics and get his hands a little dirty, those numbers can be much higher. Am I right, Doug? So,
No comment.
Right.
The
exactly.
statute of limitations is not up
Under
on
the
that.
advice of my attorney, no comment.
Unlike absentee voting.
Right. Yeah. So that's the direct marketing approach. It's a bit on the nose for my taste, but perfect for the Mormons. But let's get a little more interesting, shall we? Unlike the Mormons, who have very little to offer in the way of a fun lifestyle, some cults draw people in with the promise of an extremely fun lifestyle. That's the case with one of the very first cults we covered on the show, the Raelians. We're back to the Raelians.
And they've come up twice today.
Yeah, exactly. As you guys will recall, this is the UFO believing cult that Uncle Mark was just talking about. Their recruitment often starts in bars and on college campuses, and usually looks something like this. An attractive woman approaches a lonely guy at the end of the bar and lets him know that she's a member of a group that has free sex. Now, considering the pitch, I'm actually kind of surprised the Raelians aren't beating the Mormons for their numbers.
I'm surprised I'm not a Raelian at this point.
Right? You get a little closer to Quebec and maybe you can work it out.
It's not too late.
Here's the thing, though. The "we're so fun and free" pitch can also go pretty slaunch ways pretty quick. One cult that was really popular for a while had just that sort of pitch. Be free, everybody. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Their charismatic leader was a short, wild, long-haired hippie type, and the promise of drugs to expand the mind was a huge draw back in the 60s, especially in California. And who wouldn't want to join up with a bunch of crazy kids with names like Tex Watson and Squeaky Frome? Unfortunately, Charles Manson's family fizzled out in the late 60s, early 70s. Not sure why.
Because Brad Pitt killed them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And his mean dog.
Yeah.
Some cults have turned to multimedia to lure potential adherents. When Marshall Applewhite's Heaven's Gate membership, we're covering a lot of familiar ground here.
We are.
People have got to start some more cults so we have more to talk about.
That's right.
Please don't ask for that to happen.
Yeah, don't. There's plenty.
Jesus Christ.
But when Heaven's Gate membership was dwindling in the late 90s, he made a video. It was terrible, of course, just his bald head and enormous ears against a purple curtain background, telling all the new recruits about how Earth was about to be recycled and how you don't need to believe him, but he is definitely the new incarnation of Jesus. So, believe him. Yeah. The 90s were a different time. Now, any 7-year-old with an iPhone can produce a show with better production values than most professionals back then. So
Yeah.
I think people were more prone to be wowed by something like that. Which is maybe why one cult made an adorable Japanese anime series with their bearded leader, Shoko Asahara. Asahara. Sorry, Shoko Asahara is the main character. He would lead his wacky group of plucky followers through all sorts of adventures and help them using his magic powers, including levitation. Neat! Cartoons are fun. And a hell of a way to recruit people to a group that would one day kill 12 and injure thousands of people in a sarin gas attack on Tokyo. So, yeah, Om Shinrikyo. I don't remember what episode number you covered that, Uncle Mark, but that's a lot of fun.
That was a while back. Yeah, Om Shinrikyo was early on.
Anyway, of course, multimedia isn't just about cool VHS tapes that you can pass around at the water cooler. In 2013, a completely unauthorized video game was mysteriously released by unnamed developers called, I shit you not, Kanye Quest. This was a 2D science fiction alternative reality role-playing game in which Kanye West travels, he's sort of interrupted in taking out the garbage, to travel through a wormhole to the future and has to navigate a bunch of hip-hop clones. The game garnered a small underground following despite mixed critical response. Eventually it fizzled. Then, a few years later, it gained popularity again when an anonymous user went onto a forum where they declared that they had found an alternative ending to the game. Using clues from earlier in the gameplay, when asked by a character, "What do you want to do?" they typed the word ascend. This led to a hidden level of the game and a cryptic series of messages. Then there were a whole bunch of steps to take and hoops that only really techie nerds can jump through. Nobody knows what this was really all about, and the developers remain mum, but many think that there's a cult at the end of the tunnel.
I don't doubt that this is true, but I hate the fact that it is.
Yeah. It's not the only tech wild goose chase to a cult that I've stumbled on, but that was the example.
It's the Bitcoin of religion.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of a religion on its own. So.
Oh, it sure is. There are lots of other wacky methods of recruitment. In rural China, the Eastern Lightning Cult, which Uncle Mark talked about in episode 94, hid glow sticks in people's homes and even released snakes painted with scripture. So,
what?
Points for creativity, I guess.
Oh my God.
One Hollywood cult in the 60s recruited people through the vegan restaurant that they ran. David Koresh tried to bring people into the Branch Davidians through his sweet, sweet guitar licks and awesome rock and roll, which a lot of other churches have attempted to do too. I actually once went to the rock and roll church here in Salt Lake City.
How'd it go?
It was not cool. But the one thing I really wanted to talk about, the one that got me started on this whole idea, is the one that I just barely learned about. Now, in episode 60, Uncle Mark, you talked about the Falun Gong.
Yeah.
This is a Chinese meditation cult, but you missed one of their big recruitment tactics, maybe because it wasn't well known 2 years ago when you did that segment.
Because if you join up, you could be beaten and murdered by the Chinese police.
Well, there's that.
Yeah.
But this one's a U.S.-based recruitment tactic to the Falun Gong, and it's fairly well known now.
Free fried chicken.
Sign me up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm starving.
You know how a few years ago, if you were traveling on any road in Utah and looked up, you would see a billboard with a bunch of brightly colored women all dancing in flowing robes, and it said, and it was basically, they're all dancing, and it says, Shenyang.
Oh,
Shenyang.
Yeah. I know about this. Yeah.
Yeah. That
I missed this.
it turns out, and these marketing campaigns popped up all over the country, and it's just this dance troupe that goes around all over the world actually, and performs this very large 80 performer thing.
Yeah, it's a big
With a-
Chinese folk dance extravaganza, right?
Right. Well, it turns out that whole thing is a recruitment for Falun Gong.
Oh,
It's associated with them, and they, if you go to one of their performances, you will hear songs that have their theology laced in through it, and
Yeah, you know what would solidly get me into a cult is an evening of folk dance.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. A lot of sort of brightly colored people all moving in unison.
Yeah,
it's like that scene in The Burbs where the Satanists are singing, "Satan is good, Satan is my pal," but in Chinese.
Yeah.
There you go. And it's not Satan. It's something about I don't know.
old what's his name? I can't remember the film.
Oh, what's his name? That's right. So there you go. If you see the Shenyun dancers, if you go to their concert, you will see a whole bunch of religious shit that most people don't even notice because they just think they're getting traditional Chinese stuff, and they don't seem to realize that no, there's nothing traditional about it. Really, they're just seeing a very recent, like early '90s religious troupe doing some fun dance.
I'll tell you this: if I can ever go to a concert again, I will go to every cult concert available.
I like it. So there you go. When we start our cult, we'll have to. I feel like we'll have to find a new tactic.
I think what to take from this is trust no one, make no friends, and never engage in art, and you won't be in a cult.
I think it's great.
And stay off the internet.
That's great. That's a
And
great
never
takeaway.
Never answer the door.
That's right.
So it's a lot like now.
2020.
All right, let's not join anything.
Great.
Let's move on.
I'll move on then. Gentlemen,
Ho!
Start your engines.
sorry. Well, we've been jingling our bells, and we've been ringing our bells by next to the kettle, hoping that someone will toss a quarter in, and it's the holidays. Everybody's got a whole bunch of other shit to do. So
Yeah.
so it's fine that we only have a couple people to thank.
Yeah.
But we do have a couple people to thank. So first, thanks to Courtney, who's our new patron. And then I believe, Uncle Mark, we've got somebody to thank from the one-time donation.
Oh my God, we do. This is our dear friend Cindy, who is already a top tier patron, but she gave us a very kind one-time little stocking stuffer. Yeah, so
You hear that, patrons? You don't have to stop with just being a patron.
we also
You
work
can
for
keep
tips.
giving.
Yeah, and so if you can't be like Cindy, I was going to say something reassuring, but all I'm going to say is shame.
There is that. Listen, if the holidays have been good to you and you're able to give to us, we certainly appreciate it. It's something you can do by going to howtoheretic.com and click on the support us thing, and then you can give us some of your money and be one of the great people of the world. You can also review us and rate us on your various places, your pod blaster of choice. So please do that. Go to iTunes, go to whatever. I don't have a thing picked out for this week, so we're not going to do
We'll
it.
return to that in earnest next week, but please do.
So maybe your review will be the one that I choose to read next week. Give us 5 stars, only 5 stars, never anything below that. And even if you think we only deserve 2, You have to give us 5.
Yeah.
It's the rules.
If you think we only deserve 2, why are you listening to the show?
Right? Yeah, that's a great point.
I mean, I get it. I think that's probably what we deserve too.
It's probably correct, but just stop listening. Don't be a dick
Knock
and
that
give us
shit
2
off.
stars.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, let us move on.
Uncle Mark,
Shalom.
I don't know about you, but in these
Nobody does, Dan. Nobody does.
Nobody does.
Yes.
In these trying times, I turn to literature for wisdom. I don't know. I
To the written word.
I feel like one thing we can all agree on is that no wisdom is going to come out of our television screens, because they have things like they are politicians on them and stuff. So
Well, not since Dynasty was canceled.
right? Where are we supposed? Cheers is gone. How are we supposed to get all of our wisdom?
Yeah,
So-
Dynasty
Falcon
was-
Crest kind of helped me along for a minute. But
Was
that's
Dynasty canceled, or did they just complete the story?
that story is never complete.
that is such a philosophical conundrum, isn't it?
Look, the show may be canceled, but the story continues.
That's right.
Yeah.
But maybe Uncle Doug has some literature based wisdom to impart to us. What do you
Well,
think?
I have neither. Because it's something from the Bible, so it's neither wise nor literary.
Well, then how about just a story, a tale of wonderful morality that we can apply to our lives today?
Right.
Oh, I hate
You
to
said
disappoint you
Bible.
again.
Doug just hangs up.
Doug's done.
Click. Well, dear
Color
uncles,
bars. What's the audio color bars?
You gotta have
After-
synesthesia for that.
yeah, exactly. After taking a couple deep dives off the 10-meter board into the shallow end of the baptismal font, by delving into some of the longest and most bonkers books in the Bible like Genesis, Leviticus, and Revelation, I took what passes as a sabbatical during COVID-19 by covering a couple of the shortest books in the Bible like Philemon and Ecclesiastes. Well, I guess I felt like I needed to pull my weight around here, Uncle Mark.
Hey.
Hey, no, you did single-handedly in one segment tackle Ezekiel.
I remember
Which
I was in my apartment in Toronto halfway through reading it, and I'm like, oh, fuck this. Fuck this shit. Fuck this podcast. But yeah.
Yeah,
You
it
guys
was-
are bad at choosing, is all I'm saying.
and that will be proven today.
Yeah.
I didn't have it in me to take on one of the longer books, so I opted for number 19 on the worst offender of Uncle Doug's first rule of the Bible. And as we'll see, as I read this book, I began to convince myself that this was the most vile and violent book in the Bible. But it turns out that while it's in the top 10, it's not in the top 5.
Okay.
Today I want to talk about the book of Joshua. Joshua is the first book after the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch encompasses the creation of the earth through Exodus of the Jews from Egypt, which never happened.
Right.
Joshua is referred to as the first book of the Deuteronomistic history.
Almost
Nailed
got
it.
it. Almost
Nailed
got it.
Like this segment is going to be a lot of me making bad, vocal choices.
It's a 7 shilling word, or 7 shekel word. You almost got it.
Exactly. As many Christians and Jews believe that Moses wrote the Pentateuch, many believe that Joshua wrote the book of Joshua. He did not. The author
Considering
isn't.
the likelihood that there was no Joshua, yeah, it seems unlikely that he wrote the book.
Are you going to
Exactly.
tell me that Garp didn't write the world according to Garp?
Right. Spider-Man was so good at his own illustrations.
Or that the dude didn't write The Big Lebowski. The author is anonymous, if there was only one, and the book itself was probably written in the 6th or 7th century BCE. Few, if any, of the events depicted actually occurred, and the book is most likely an amalgamation of various actual events that took place all over the region in all kinds of different time frames, exaggerations of those events, and myths and legends. The Bible.
Right.
The true stuff.
Yeah. It leaves off at the end of Deuteronomy, where the Israelites are crossing the River Jordan into the Promised Land for the first time. Moses, however, because God is a dick, is refused entry and dies. His main lieutenant, Joshua, is put in charge, and that's where the story picks up. The book itself is broken into 4 parts: God's pep talk, Joshua's conquest, the division of the conquered lands, and Joshua's farewell speech. This works perfectly for my purposes, as I'm only going to cover the first 2 parts today, because unlike Joshua and his army, I give a shit about humanity. Now, I don't want to spend much time talking about the personality and character of Joshua because, frankly, neither did the Bible. Let's just say, for the purposes of this story, you are what you do. Also, pronunciation disclaimer, I am going to say a bunch of surnames and place names wrong, partly because in all likelihood they didn't exist, and mostly because I don't care. If I happen to mispronounce the name of a fictitious king that was slaughtered by a fictitious army in a fictitious land, please at me all you want.
Yeah,
right.
Doug's just trying to start a beef with Israel.
That's right.
All right, here we go. Joshua chapter 1 begins right where Deuteronomy 34 leaves off.
Oh, good. I was hoping that was where we were going to pick up.
It's not much of a cliffhanger there. Moses dies and Joshua is appointed. Joshua, son of Nun, that's N-U-N. Joshua is commanded to cross the Jordan River, and wherever the sole of his foot touches belongs to him. From Lebanon
nice.
to the Euphrates, from the land of the Hittites to the Mediterranean, it's all yours, baby. God promises that no man will defeat him all of his days, saying, "As I was with Moses, so I shall be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee." We'll see that this doesn't pan out exactly.
Well, didn't you just say that he forsook Moses? So
Exactly.
Yeah.
your promises not to forsake are kind of shallow there.
That's a
Lord.
Trump promise right there.
Yeah.
God continues his pep talk for a few more verses, promising that so long as Joshua is courageous and his people righteous, this land will be theirs and their children's. As we'll see, God was right to place his faith in Joshua. The Jews, not so much. Joshua then commands the Jews to prepare their victuals, because within 3 days they will leave all their women, children, and riches on the side of the Jordan and begin their conquest. The Jews swear their allegiance to Joshua just as they had to Moses. Honestly, that should have been the first red flag. Having the Jews of the Bible pledge allegiance to you might be the most useless thing in the world. Chapter 2 has...
that's true. These are the same Jews that flipped on Moses like 20 times in the space of 6 months. So
When he went on a hike, they built a golden calf.
yeah.
So, yeah. Chapter 2 has Joshua sending 2 spies from the land of Shittim, S-H-I-T-T-I-M. Yes,
Yeah, we've
Shittim.
talked about Shittim before.
We have.
Yeah.
They're sent to go spy on Jericho, which will be their first conquest. They arrive and find refuge in the house of a harlot named Rahab. As we've said ad nauseum on this podcast, if you're a named woman in the Bible, it's either very good news or very bad news. No woman gets a name.
More toward bad.
Yeah, more toward bad. No woman in the Bible gets a name and then just fades away from the narrative.
Although you'd think that the clue toward whether this was good or bad was that she was a harlot.
You'd
but
think.
that turns out not to be the case.
But you'd be wrong.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. The king of Jericho finds out about these 2 guys and demands that she produce them, clearly seeing them as a threat, which they are. Rahab lies and says that they have left her place. She doesn't know where they went. But then she takes them and hides them on her roof under stalks of flax. She tells them that their reputation for mass murder precedes them and that everyone knows about what they did at the Red Sea and how they utterly destroyed the cities of Sihon and Og on the other side of the Jordan. She begs them to show her and her family mercy since she showed them a kindness. They agree, and she lets them escape out of her window on a scarlet rope. They tell her that when the time comes, hang that same rope out her window and gather all her family and friends that she wants spared into her house. Chapter 3 begins with Joshua preparing his army for war. He commands the Levite priest to carry the Ark of the Covenant through the army and to the shores of the Jordan, and his army follows. Before crossing, he tells the assembled army that God will surely drive out the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Jebusites from before them. That's called foreshadowing.
Jebusites are always my favorite. I'm never going to not love the Jebusites.
Jebusites, I know, right? Then the priest that bore the ark stepped into the waters of the Jordan, and the waters stopped flowing and began to accumulate into a huge mound of water upstream. This allowed the army to cross on dry ground. This is an obvious passing of the genocidal torch from Moses to Joshua. Chapter 4 has Joshua not wanting to waste a good miracle, so he commands 1 man from each tribe to get a rock from the center of the dried-up river and make a pile on the shore, so future generations would know what happened here. I'm not sure why a rock from the middle of the river would be like, oh, well, proof positive.
Yeah,
right. Or you could just have it printed into a book you can get free in any hotel room in the world.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
But from forevermore, that's why we all know that if you see a rock on the side of a river, it means that somebody crossed it once.
Yeah, that a genocidal army made a miracle so their feet didn't get wet.
Yeah, a pile of 12 rocks.
Yeah.
So these guys do this, and then when the priests carrying the ark step kind of out of the riverbed, the Jordan begins flowing again, just like before. Joshua then takes 40,000 or so men and camps at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. At the beginning of chapter 5, it seems that the word of the Israeli army crossing the Jordan on dry ground has made its way to the kings of west of the Jordan, and they do not take the news well. Their hearts melt and their spirits are broken because they know the fate that is marching their way. The narrative then takes a severe right turn into Mutilation Town, as Joshua is commanded by God to make several sharp knives in order to circumcise the children of Israel a second time.
Yikes! Wait, what?
Wait.
Now,
How much more do you need?
Exactly. This is not. I don't have a lot to give here, guys.
There's only so much.
Yeah.
This is not exactly as ghastly as it sounds, because during their wanderings in Egypt, they had several children, 2 generations worth to be exact, and had picked up many converts along the way. None of these had yet been circumcised, so what better time than the eve of battle to cut the tip of your dicks off?
Yeah.
So
it is just as awful as it sounds, in my opinion.
I agree.
What you want right before battle is a significant self wound.
Right,
a significant
exactly.
bleeding wound.
It's like an own goal.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Joshua sets about it, and the place where he does this just happens to be called the Hill of the Foreskins. So, for future reference, when your commander orders your army to pitch camp on the Hill of the Foreskins or the Mount of Amputated Fingers or the Valley of Kidneys, offer to march a little bit further.
Yeah.
So,
or the mound of Adam's apples.
mention is made here that the army is no longer fed manna or unleavened bread, for since this is supposed to be the land of milk and honey, they begin to eat the fruit of the land instead. I don't think that's fair trade for getting the tip of my dick cut off, but it's not nothing, I guess. The chapter ends with Joshua confronting a man with a sword, only to find out that it's the captain of the Lord's army. Joshua falls on his face in worship and is commanded to remove his sandals, because where he stands is holy, which he does. This is another obvious passing of the blood-soaked torch, as this is what Moses was commanded to do in the presence of the burning bush. Don't worry, this dude will not be a part of the narrative going forward, and we'll never talk about him again.
Yeah,
Good.
That's how that works.
Yeah. Chapter 6 is where the fun begins. Did I say fun? I meant God-sanctioned bloody genocide that has justified 3,000 years of bloodshed and continues to confound peace in the Middle East to this day. So here we go. Jericho is prepared for a siege from the Israelites, so God gives Joshua a battle plan that is, let's say, unique. The army was to silently march in a single circuit around the city every day for 7 days. Then when they had circumnavigated the city and returned to camp, 7 priests with 7 trumpets, reed shofars, were then to blare their soothing music at the top of their lungs until dark.
It's melodious shofar
I know.
music.
I mean, that's a Gitmo tactic right there.
Pretty much. Then on the 7th day, when the shofar started up after the army's light cardio, the army was to shout at the top of their lungs. This would bring the city walls crashing to the ground, at which point they could enter and kill everyone. This they do. They march around the city 7 times once a day, and then on the 7th day, as promised, they shout with the shofars and the walls come falling down. To be fair, if 7 dudes blared shofars at my house between 5 p.m. and sundown for 7 days, I would gladly burn it to the ground.
Yeah, I would definitely call the police non-emergency number. And just say there's like this crazy nuisance just constantly out here.
7 shofars is not a nuisance; it's a crime.
Yeah, it is.
So
It's also, I think,
is that
a
one of the
metal
8
band.
days of Hanukkah? Is it seven shofars blowing?
That's right.
Do they have a Hanukkah song like that?
I
with
wish there
all the
was
birds
7 shofars blowing.
Yeah.
The Israelites enter the city and slaughter everyone inside, with 2 notable exceptions. Rahab the harlot and her family are spared and removed from the city, and all the gold, silver, and vessels of brass and iron are spared and added to the treasury of the Lord. After they had finished killing
Spared.
all in the...
What do they mean spared?
I know, right?
They didn't kill him.
They didn't
Right,
kill
like
them.
what are they're inanimate objects? don't kill the brass.
Have at you! After they had finished killing all in the town, and this is laid out in the text, and so many times it's maddening. The young and old, the men and women, the ox and sheep and ass,
Yeah.
they set fire to the rubble so that the rest of Canaan would know what was about to happen to them.
Rubble typically doesn't burn, but
Sure, whatever.
yeah, not at
It's
the
a good
heat those
Middle
guys
Eastern
could
rebel.
generate.
You found a hole in this narrative.
Yeah.
If that's not cruel and violent enough for you, strap in. Chapter 7 is a weird one. It begins with the children of Israel, plural, the children of Israel, and in every instance before this, meaning the collective, the royal we, committing a trespass against the Lord. It turns out that one guy, Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took of the accursed thing, and that the anger of the Lord was kindled against the children, again plural, of Israel. So one guy took an accursed thing, and God is pissed at everybody. Now, that all happens in verse 1, and it's going to take a little time. In fact, it's going to take to the end of the chapter to suss out what was Achan's sin, and what was the accursed thing, and how how to go about removing the stink of one man's sin from an entire people.
He ate an owl.
Spoiler alert, it involves stoning and burning women and children.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
Yeah. So we put aside Achan's sin for a moment and rejoin the narrative. Joshua sends men from the smoldering mass grave of Jericho to Ai. It's spelled A-I, which is beside Bethaven, east of Bethel. You know the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to the east there.
That's where they've got the good mall.
That's right. The outlet stores.
His guys return and report that Ai is poorly guarded, and
they also have the Canaanite casino is out there.
Oh, yeah.
Casino.
I think the roulette is rigged, though. Don't do that one.
The lucky camel. So his guys come back and say Ai is poorly guarded, and he need only send 3,000 men to ransack and destroy the town. These 3,000 men meet an incredible defeat at the hands of 36 dudes from Ai.
Wow.
Right?
Those guys had AKs.
They don't just repel them, but pursue them, inflicting casualties all the way back to Jericho. So can you imagine? It's like 36 commandos from Arnold Schwarzenegger's from the movie Commando.
Yeah.
The defeat is so one-sided and humiliating that Joshua fears that word of it will cause the regional powers to band together and destroy him.
Yeah.
And again, remember, this defeat is because they've committed a sin they don't know about against God. So Joshua rends his garments, puts dust in his hair, and throws himself at the mercy of the Lord.
Like you do.
Yeah. And how would you know if Joshua put dust in his hair? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, what is Joshua's normal dust level?
High, I assume.
Right, especially since the river got out of his way for him to cross it. So.
Yeah, literally, he can't even take a bath.
Yeah,
the water
just he repels water like oil or a duck's back.
So the Lord responds that all of Israel has sinned by taking the accursed thing, and unless they sanctify themselves, they will be destroyed. Somehow Joshua figures out that of all the people in his army, it was Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe Judah, that took the accursed thing. He has Achan brought before him and commands him to confess his sin. Achan does just that, hoping for mercy. Not going to get it. It turns out that
does he know Joshua?
Exactly. It turns out that the accursed thing was a goodly Babylonish garment, 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold worth 50 shekels. So basically, a couple armloads of the loot stolen from the now ethnically cleansed people of Jericho. In the midst of an orgy of violence and looting, this one guy grabbed a few trinkets for himself. Confronted, he confessed his sin, and for his confession, what would you guess his reward was? Take your time.
He was forced to eat his own gallbladder.
He had to circumcise his own self.
Both would be better. Achan, the silver and the gold, and the garment, as well as his wife and children, his oxen, his asses, his sheep, and even his fucking tent, are gathered up and stoned to death, then burned.
Wait,
you stoned a tent to death?
Yeah, exactly.
That's some hardcore shit.
That's hardcore shit. But isn't it like one of those baseball pitchbacks? Just the little baseball flies back at you. Pitchbacks? You guys remember those? No. Okay, I'm an old man.
Man, sports.
There's a little net, and because if you had an absentee father like we did, then you didn't have anybody to play catch with, so you throw the ball at the net and it bounces back to you.
Oh, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, yeah, that can't nearly be true. You've known me for years. That's true. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to dwell too much on this because it's awful, but can you imagine how long it must take to stone an ox to death?
Ugh.
Let alone several oxen? And
the kids, his wife, the kids you can do in inside of 5 minutes.
Exactly.
A 6-year-old, don't ask me how I know that, but you can stone them to death in 6 minutes.
And then stoning his wife and children who weren't even fucking there for the crime he committed. The crime.
And his animals that are just property.
Exactly. Well, this indiscriminate, brutal, and blunt violence seems to have had the intended effect of pleasing their omnipotent Lord, because chapter 8 begins with this, quote, "And the Lord said unto Joshua, Fear not, neither be thou dismayed. Take all the people of war with thee, and arise, go up to Ai. See, Ai again is the name of that city. I have given into thy hand the king of Ai, and his people, and his city, and his land." So let's just take an inventory here, shall we? Josh and his men have just committed literal ethnic cleansing by killing every living thing, including infants, in Jericho, and looted all the gold and silver of the city. God, the all-powerful creator of the universe, noticed that one of his blood-soaked soldiers grabbed a couple shekels for himself. So to balance the eternal scales of justice, God demands the brutal death of his entire family and all they own, and in reward for this act, supplies Joshua with another genocide. Okay, back to the narrative.
Hey, it's just morality.
I was going to say, morality. Get some.
Joshua commanded 30,000 of his men to secretly flank Ai and lie in waiting behind the city.
How did 30,000 men secretly do anything?
They did it on tippy toes, obviously.
Yeah, a city of probably 8,000 people does not know that 30,000 men are just outside.
I think they all hummed in unison. Dum, 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 ba-rum, bum, bum, bum.
He took 5,000 of his men and hid them off to the side. Again, how?
Yeah.
And then took a much more meager force
Behind
and camped.
what?
I know exactly. This is in Palestine. Behind what exactly?
Right. Just
the
fucking
rock
dirt.
The city walls of Ai were like at least 6 feet high,
Yeah.
so then they couldn't see anything.
They couldn't see over their own walls. He then took a much more meager force and camped directly in front of Ai. In the morning, when the king of Ai saw only this small contingency, and flush with his insane victory earlier, he commands his men to pursue. All the men of Ai chase Joshua, who stretched forth his spear, signaling the 30,000 soldiers to take the city.
Yeah, that's bait.
Yeah, filled now with nothing but women and children, and set it on fire. This they did, and then marched out of the city toward the army of Ai. Joshua turned his host around and also called out the other 5,000 men waiting in the wings.
Wait. The king of Ai burned his own city down?
No, so what happened was the king of Ai saw Joshua with a small force.
Yeah.
He commanded his entire army to attack. Joshua pretended to flee, but then signaled his 30,000 men that the city was unguarded.
Oh.
They invaded the city, set it on fire, and then went out to attack the army.
Because a king setting his own city with all the people in it on fire in the Bible, I'd be like, sure, that's what they do.
Yeah, that sounds all the plausible.
Not surprised.
So now the army is surrounded, and no doubt listening to the cries of their families as they burn alive in the in the city behind them.
You say that in such a negative way.
Sorry. So everyone but the king of Ai were slaughtered, according to the narrative. 12,000 people died that day, either by fire or the sword. There was one tender mercy dispensed by the army. All the cattle and oxen were taken alive and added to the army's supply chain. The king was brought before Joshua.
What about their tents? Did they kill their tents? Or their brass?
So the king's brought before Joshua, who, while still alive, watches his entire city burn to the ground, every member of his army killed, and every inhabitant of the city burned alive. He then hanged the king and tossed his body onto the rubble in front of the gates. So, happy days.
Morality.
Remember, according to the narrative, these are the good days. These are the good guys,
Yeah.
and the men, women, and children of Ai, who invaded no one and fought and died to protect their city and family, are the bad guys in this narrative.
Or just burned alive in their beds. Fuck them.
Yeah. Chapter 9 begins with the various Hittite, Amorite, Canaanite, Perizzite, Hivite, and Jebusite kings deciding that fighting this one force alone is suicide, but banding together might be their only hope. We won't hear about this again until the next chapter. Instead, this chapter is what's called the Gibeonite deception. Forgive me. Emissaries from Gibeon are sent to Joshua to try and trick him into an alliance that will spare their people. They wear old sackcloth and old wine casks adorn their asses, their donkeys, in an attempt to show that they had traveled from much further away than they had. The idea being, if they did not appear to be local and were not therefore a threat, Joshua would enter into an alliance with them because why not? They could then
Okay.
use this. What's that?
I said, okay. It's a great trick. All I'm saying is that is a brilliant deception.
Well, then the idea was they could use this alliance as a shield from invasion and genocide. Again, because this is the Bible, Joshua discovers their quote-unquote treachery, read desperate attempt to save their people, and instead of killing them, makes them all slaves to the Israeli army. Now, chapter 10 may be...
So, an improvement. I think there
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
a
It's
narrative
getting
improvement.
nicer as we go.
At least they're alive.
Yeah.
Now, chapter 10 may be...
Good news, guys. Slavery.
Got good news and bad news. I'm not in any way sure of this, but chapter 10 may be the most blood-soaked and genocidal pages ever written. We return to the possible coalition against the Israelites hinted at the beginning of the last chapter. Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, has heard about what Joshua has done to Ai and to Jericho, and now to the once great city of Gibeon, because they tried to make peace with the Israelites. So Adonizedek reaches out to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram.
You're just making this up.
I know. Piram,
Old
king
King Hoham.
Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon, and proposes an alliance. Rather than taking on the Israelites directly, he proposes they attack Gibeon.
Can I ask a question? How much land did it require for you to be a king in this area?
10 square miles.
Not even. I think 2
It
blocks.
can't be. There's like 700 kings.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right.
So they decide to attack Gibeon as punishment for capitulation as a warning to other cities. So these 5 kings lay siege to Gibeon, who reaches out to Joshua to remind him, hey, remember how we belong to you now and your God? And you know how your God feels about people touching his things? So we're all about to be killed, so help. Joshua realizes that they're right. God doesn't like other kids playing with his toys. So he marches all night and routs the coalition handily, pursuing them all the way from Gibeon to Beth-horon to Azekah and finally to Makkedah. Not to be outdone,
I'm pretty sure a Mormon mom named all of her kids those names.
Totally.
There is a maxi van passing through our neighborhood right now with those names.
With
in it.
Makkedah and Azekah on it. Not to be outdone, God hurls great stones down on these armies as they flee, killing more of them than the Israelites were able to slay with their swords. This slaughter lasted all day, and concerned that nightfall might allow some of these fleeing soldiers to escape, Joshua cries out to the Lord, who then stops the sun and the moon in the sky, so Joshua and his merry men can finish their slaughter in full daylight.
That's neat.
Don't worry.
That's a good war trick right there.
Yeah. Don't worry, we're just getting started. The 5 kings broke away from their armies during the retreat and hid themselves in a cave outside of Makkedah, where Joshua commanded them to be walled in and kept there so they would live to see the destruction of their armies. Once that destruction had finished, he brought the 5 kings before him and commanded that the entire army of Israel take turns stomping on their head and necks. I know. After which Joshua smote them, then slew them, then hung them from 5 trees. After that, Joshua had what was left of them tossed back into that cave where he had them walled in.
Okay, so if I am understanding this correctly, there were 30,000 soldiers.
Yes.
And each one of them
50,000
got to stomp
soldiers.
on the head and the neck of each one of these men.
And
after
then they tortured
30,000 stomps,
Right.
he then hung them, or did he slew them? Okay.
He
Smote
smote
them.
them, he slew them, and then he hung
No,
them.
not an additional smote.
Yeah, please don't smite me.
Kicked him in the balls.
Well,
I
that
just
boy's...
feel like one thing that needs to be clarified here. Joshua's the good guy, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That, brothers, is one bloody fucking chapter, but
Yeah.
we're not even close to done yet.
What if you're the 28,000th guy in line to stomp on these guys, and it's just like, do you just
Your
have to go
shoes
through the
are
motions?
ruined.
There's nothing left. Like,
Exactly.
you just have to go, okay, Joshua, here I am stomping on this
Stomp, stomp.
puddle of liquid and pulp.
So, having utterly destroyed the armies of the 5 rebellious kings and having completely desecrated their corpses, Joshua was just getting going. He then took his army to 3 of the 5 rebellious cities, Lachish, Hebron, and Eglon, where they, quote, smote it with the edge of the sword and all the souls that were therein, and let none remain. If you're wondering why Joshua left Jarmuth and Jerusalem alone, It's not discussed in the text. He went to 3 of the 5 cities. But
Inconclusive.
one thing I can tell you is that this was not an act of mercy, because Joshua then took his army to Makkedah and killed everyone in that city. Then he went to Libnah and killed everyone in that city. Then he went to Gezer, Kadesh Barnea, Gaza, and Goshen. Only when Joshua had killed all the fleeing soldiers, tortured and executed his captives, and murdered all the men, women, and children in 10 different cities was his bloodlust sated enough for this chapter and chapter 10. Yeah, it's bonkers. Now, because this is the Bible, and why say in one chapter what you can say in 2, chapter 11 is basically a rehash of chapter 10, just on a grander scale. Basically, the entirety of the rest of Canaan, north, south, east, and west, realize that there is no way to negotiate with this invasion, and their only chance is to face them. So the kings of Hazor, Madam, Shimron, Ashphath, Shinneroth, and Dor, and all the remaining Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, and Hivites gather their soldiers, horses, and chariots together, which were apparently as numerous as the sands of the sea, and Joshua kills them all. Not only did he kill all the soldiers, but all the horses, and why not burned all the chariots.
Sure. Like you do.
Yeah. Joshua and his Israelite horde then went city to city.
They killed all their horses.
They killed all the horses.
Okay.
Because look, it's not like somebody else's horse could be of use to you.
Exactly.
I know.
At the time,
They've
a horse was like the maximum amount of power concentrated in one place that you could generate.
Well, and they've
move
already
shit
been
and ride shit. Like, it's insane.
They've already been looting every other city. So
Yeah.
for some reason, they just decide to, utterly fuck it.
These will be of no use to us.
Right. I think they have too many horses at this point.
Yeah.
So Joshua and his Israelite horde then went city to city, killed everyone inside, pillaged the loot and livestock, and burned the rubble. Only the aforementioned people of Gibeon and the Hivites, for some reason, were spared through slavery. So they've just entered Canaan and in half a book destroyed it utterly. When we get to the end of chapter 11, with this nice little encapsulation of the show so far, quote, "So Joshua took the whole land, according to all that the Lord had said unto Moses, and Joshua gave it for an inheritance unto Israel according to their divisions by their tribes, and the land rested from war."
Yay! What a blessing.
Yeah. So chapter 12 is just one long recitation of all the kings, cities, and peoples that Joshua and his forces have killed, enslaved, or destroyed upon crossing the Jordan River. And in an act of mercy that Joshua showed to no one, I will not subject you to that list, right. Except to say that several of the kings, cities, and peoples are familiar from the previous chapters, but many of them are not.
Oh, there's more.
There's more.
Oh, my God.
It seems even the Bible got tired of talking about genocide and decided to paraphrase. So that's where we get to in the half of the book, just one half.
Wow.
They enter Canaan from Egypt and utterly destroy it. And that brings us to the end of this miserable segment.
That's delightful.
Yeah,
it feels like it should be called. There should be like a subheading or a subtitle to this whole book, which is just like, "Aren't we dicks?" or something. I don't know.
And no characters are developed. None are given any motivations or stories or pathos or anything. It's just a series of then he went to this city and killed every woman, every child in it, and burned it. And then he went to this city and killed every woman and every child and burned it for 12 miserable chapters. So
yeah, I don't know. And you hear this story, and the walls of Jericho coming down is this wonderful, happy, hooray! We defeated
it's
Jericho.
Like in children's books.
Who did fucking nothing? They didn't do anything.
Yeah, they were in their homes when they were
just
destroyed.
Chilling.
They were minding their shit.
Yeah.
Right.
This would be a question from I don't know if you guys know the answer to this. I don't. And maybe Hadar or somebody can weigh in on this, but all of these, I don't know if these are tribes or like the Hivites and the Shivites and the Jebites, and like how many of those were real? Like,
well, that's a great question, and several of them, Hebron and Gaza,
real places,
are real places. So, like I said at the beginning, this book is kind of it's an amalgamation of actual events that took place all over the Middle East at different time periods. It's an amalgamation of places all over the Middle East that actually existed, and it's a shit ton of made-up stuff and made-up events. So it's complete
potentially
chaos.
Many of these things could have happened, but maybe at different periods. And maybe is Joshua like a composite character?
I don't think he's a composite character. I think all of these things were put together under the tent of Joshua.
Well, that's what I mean. Like,
yeah, exactly.
They just said, okay, well, all this genocide was under this fucking Bronze Age Iron Man. We've created this character,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That was the instrument of God's wrath. Whereas maybe it was just fucking the shit resource scrambling warfare.
Yeah.
Tribal beefs that were in fashion at the time.
Right.
Yeah,
and not for nothing, but if you want to brag about this book or be proud of what this book says, the people of Jericho should write their story, and that's a story you can be proud of. Or the people of all these other towns that were minding their business. The people of Ai who repelled this invading force before they were wiped out.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the story of the conquest of a land from the perspective of the conquerors.
Well, that's always history's always written by the winners, right?
Truly,
That's right.
but it's hard to talk about how this book is a wellspring of morality and ethics, and this. So,
All right. Well, might makes right, and that's we'll hopefully. Well, I guess we'll just come back to it and hear more.
Spoiler
makes
alert.
right, children. Good night.
yeah.
Good night.
Spoiler
Moving
alert
on.
for part 2. It doesn't get better.
Moving on.
Oh well, friends, that is it for this week's show.
Hey, if you've knocked down the wall of a city by blowing trumpets at it, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at howtoheretic.com.
Or if you're that strange man in the trailer in Pipe Springs, Arizona, I would really love to hear from you. You can leave us a voicemail at 903-88-HOW-TO, which is 903-884-6986. You can also
Or just show up at Mark's door and knock.
Or just tap on his bedroom window.
my third floor bedroom window. That would be perfect. I'm also on Twitter at toheretic.com.
As always, thanks to our incredible patrons.
And thanks to our most beloved abductee, Cody Layton, for editing the show.
And thanks to all of you friends for tuning in.
Bye, friends.